I don't know if it's ever been talked about. I don't know if I can. It's one of my difficult things that I know and I can't emulate it, so I'll try. Is that this distortion of time that I've talked about before, where everything is in the isness of the now, there is no past and there is no future in true spirituality. That's a construct of man, therefore illusory, therefore not an actual reality. Well, all that is true, and there is no such thing as time. Now, having said that, if there is no future and there is no past, am I saying that a personality of the future could be affecting you now? And I am saying that. And that is something that I haven't seen in any books or anything, because people will show me books on reincarnation and the eagerness for me to talk about reincarnation as I see it and give at least my opinions and my knowledge on the subject. That's one of the points that, first of all,
you could be learning from your future.
You're sure? And you can have characteristic of your future personality. And I don't see any problem with that. And I know that people listening or watching this are going to say, oh, just about the time I had a linear type thing to memorize and a linear type thing that, well, 1,500 years ago I was King George, now I see why I'm so pugnacious. Or again, dealing with characteristics. And I don't mean to confuse anybody, but I can't do justice to saying anything without saying...
But all futures probability. So you've got like 5 problems.
Oh, now you're starting to see that this is a very complicated subject. Because that's true. That future scenarios are not absolute. And that free will, changes, subtle manipulation at different spiritual realms can change your future characteristic and personality. So if you're here now dealing with a future personality or a characteristic of a future personality, what happens if it doesn't come true? Was that really a characteristic of a future personality? Well, the answer to all these things is yes, all the way down the line.
You are all of your probable future.
Yeah, and you will be responsible for it. I don't mean that to say, watch out, you're going to be responsible, so don't be bad. I mean, that's a power positive thing, a good thing to say, to maintain, it's better to be good than bad. But the answer is yes, that you will be responsible for everything.
Everything you'd ever consider.
Every characteristic and every denial of a characteristic. I mean, we are all famous for that. I mean, all my life, practically all my life, I've denied characteristics that I just refused, I should say now, of being able to see clearly. In other words, damn it, I was right. I was justified. I was righteous. And yet, what was the intent? What was the actual intention? The true, honest intention was to love. And I'm saying this of a particular time in my life. Was to love. But what did I do? I hurt instead.
Yes.
My intentions were to love, but my actualities were to hurt because of a whole series of justifications, righteousness, and in other words, did I have expectations of my wife Elaine, and did they meet my actual experiences? Well, when that did not take place, and it doesn't take place a lot of times for all of us, I mean, every one of us have either over or under expectations, and they're not fulfilled because our daily or minute-by-minute experiences would never be able to accomplish that because of our ability to fantasize, to create fantasies and so on that are unrealistic or non-just or non-correct or just aren't suitable or appropriate. And that if we're dealing with something like a relationship, like I mentioned with my wife Elaine and I, it's very unrealistic to have very many expectations at all because I'm expecting things that she'll deal with in her free will.
Here's another one in terms of reincarnation. I've met 2 different women who thought they were the same personality in history. Is that possible?
Yeah. All right. The linear way of thinking of that is the answer that would be highly improbable. Now, I would suggest to anybody that runs into that dilemma situation or that circumstance to really get a little more intelligent, a little more realistic.
Could they both be just like linking into universal knowledge?
Well, they could be linking into a characteristic that is identical. I mean, how are you or any one of us to differentiate an identical type characteristic? So, I mean, if you're looking at a beautiful sunset and you say something about that sunset, is it the same sunset that I'm also talking about? And can we both learn the identical lessons from that same sunset? Yes, we can. So as opposed to being totally offensive, but again, what I would say to anybody that runs into that, get a little more realistic about where did you get that measurement from? That was not where, meaning the place, but in what mindset? How did you do it? Was it a past life regression? Was it sudden intuitive knowledge? Did you read it out of a book? Was it a genealogical trait? Isn't it funny, people that say a past life regression, they don't even bother following their genealogical trait? Because granted, most of us can only be able to follow that back 4 or 5 generations accurately at all, but there's things there to learn. And I'll give you a perfect example. I've heard people say, in a past life, I was an alcoholic. All right? I didn't have any problem with that. I thought, well, that's interesting. I hope that you learned something. Use it wisely. Don't condemn yourself for it, or don't brag about it. It's neither here nor there, and you're not in that lifetime. You're in this lifetime. This is what you have to deal with, and this is the priority, okay? But isn't it funny that I found out that that same person either did or did not have any alcoholism at all in their family tree? And let's be realistic. That's more probable as having either a problem or a minimum opportunity for a problem of alcoholism. Meaning a problem with alcohol is more genealogical than it is spiritually enhanced by the way of reincarnation of a characteristic of a prior lifetime.
So what's the value of looking into your previous life?
Well, first of all, reading any book, getting into any kind of additional knowledge that you've not been exposed to before, that's always of value. You can get mind boggled and bogged down with too many things too fast, but generally, any new and interesting information is just that, new and interesting, and it'll have a tendency to stimulate your growth. It may be boring. You may say, oh my goodness, I spent so much money and so many hours reading this dopey book of 1,000 pages, and it's just about fairies and Dungeons and Dragons type stuff. And you say, wow, I could have done this or that in that length of time. No, don't be hard on yourself. Don't be judgmental. That was a process that you went through. And here we go with talking about what we did in the past. What does it mean right this minute, and what does it mean in the next minute? And I mean, always go for the progress. If it's a bad experience, well, you've learned several things. If it's a good experience and it's repeatable, and if you're able to repeat it, well, test it. Try to repeat it. Definitely have a tendency to not try to repeat something that is negative or bad or had a bad result. And if people use any inclination of reincarnation, that's what I would prefer. I mean, I see a lot of people, just flying off on a tangent, getting obsessive and possessive and one-upsmanship. Well, you were only this, well, I was. And sometimes our ego gets fed by power of suggestion. Well, yeah, I think I can claim this one too. Then that's not true. I mean, generally, if you have to decide in that way, well, it's close enough. It's pretty close. The answer's still no. I mean, be more scientific about it. Be as sure as you can be. And then the bottom line is, of what value is any of that? Well, one of the greatest things that I've ever experienced through other people with having any realization of a past life characteristic is, say, dealing with a phobia. And it has helped and therefore cured a current phobia of individuals. Rah, big deal. That is a big deal for that individual, but so what does that all mean? In other words, now that they're cured of this particular characteristic, what about their personality? And how has that fit into their personality? Well, it's helped their personality a little bit because they no longer have a phobia. But that's only a drop in the bucket.
Well, I suppose so. If somebody has an incredible fear of crowds or an incredible fear, the agoraphobia of not going out, or a fear of heights or whatever, and if they go through hypnosis toward trying to find out where that comes from, you realize in a previous lifetime you were pushed off a cliff, or you were, suffocated, or a crowd stoned you to death or whatever. If you can put it in your past and go on and do things
and let it go. Love it for what it was.
Love it and let it
Love
go.
it as a learning experience alone, and let it go. And abracadabra, so to speak, because it can happen that quickly.
Right, but a person could also say, well, since I was stoned in a previous lifetime by a crowd, that's why I'm afraid of crowds, so I'm still going to say, sometimes they don't take it and put it aside.
Yeah. And the other thing, again, maybe there's more warnings about reincarnation than anything else, is by my perspective, what I can share outwardly with you, is that, be aware that you will be given, it's love, it's not punishment or anything else. You will be given enough opportunities to square things away. And there's a military phrase that says, squared away, good to go. And only at such time as you're really squared away are you good to go. And I mean, I kind of like that because, we've got all of our baggage, all of our stuff that we're dealing with, all of our righteousness and justification. Well, I'm calling you a jerk only because you called me a jerk first. And I have to teach you, well, wait a minute. Who decided you had to be the teacher for that person at that moment? And are you really attempting to be that person's teacher, or are you just lashing out because you've been hurt? And how does that fit into any kind of true love? How does that fit into love?
Okay, see, another thing that comes to mind is when you take the brand new baby born, there's two schools of thought. One is that child was created in the image of God and is perfect. Like you say, the soul is light, no better, perfect, no less than any other. And then you grow up thinking, I'm a reflection of God and I do my best and that. Then the other school of thought is that baby is carrying all the sins of the parents or the sins of the past lifetimes or whatever, and has to sort of crawl its way out of the muck and mire of negativity to find its spirituality. When in essence, when it was born to begin with, it was perfect spirituality.
And the problem is, the answer is yes to all of the above. Now, you said all the muck and mire and the sins carried all the stuff, but didn't they equally and also bring in characteristics and acknowledgments of other personalities that just make that irrelevant? And that this incarnation, having carried any and all of that, is the opportunity to deal with all of that. And of course, love and get rid of or cast off all the negative, all the bad stuff, and enhance and enjoy, and enhance is a good word, into more and more and better.
So as a parent of a child, to say either you're a sinner and you have to work out of all that, or you're a child of God and you have to let that shine, both of those statements can be true at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. I'll call him back. Okay.
Okay, that answers lots of questions for me because there's so many spiritual paths to God in their own way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it ends up being so much more confusing than you can't do it. You can't do it in one tape. You can't do it in one book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering where we can go from
here. I know. I'm staring at you, looking. Come on, ask me a question or something. Get me on a roll.
Okay. maybe what we can do is sort of wind up for the moment, because I know we wanted to get into the subject of reverence as well. But is there anything else on?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't think we can go off on a tangent. I mean, I can't go off on a tangent right now and just reverence. I would wish to and like to, but I don't think that I can right now. I'm mind boggled right now with all of the actualities of reincarnation. And, it's not a linear thing. It's so many knots. And that, see, one of my problems is I'm famous for my analogies and so on. And there is no analogy to this. I mean, it's outside of time, and yet we can't help but think of it in terms of past and future. And this incarnation. So the language breaks down regarding that. It has to do with unconditional love of God creating this, and then you're dealing with cause and effect. You're dealing with good and bad, righteousness. We're being judgmental just by dealing with the subject itself. So in other words, in wallowing in our actualities, our reality, we are in that mindset that disallows a recognition of the scope of reincarnation itself. The intensity. The whole story is so big, it's so involved.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's the book that's the only book that will be many more pages than my biography. It's just so much.
So it's such, I mean, maybe we don't have to try to grasp the whole reality of the truth of it all. I know when my mom was dying, I thought, oh, well, she'll pass over into spirit and then she'll know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And her prejudice against other races and her prejudice against other classes, people with less money or more money, that'll be all cleared up, because once she's spirit, she'll have all the truth and all the answers.
And there would be a probability toward that. I mean, I would prefer to call it a
But
probability.
then if she were born into another body, she wouldn't remember it all.
Well, right.
Yeah.
This is one of our problems. Now, there's our right here, right now.
Why then? What is reincarnation all about? That none of us bring in the memory bank
Well,
of the life.
I think what we should have done in the beginning is saying that reincarnation is an opportunity to reach a goal. And what is that goal? The goal is true self-realization. Now, self-realization starts out at realize all of your characteristics, all of them. Some aren't so fun. Now, do you ever sword fight? No, I only respond when she yells at me. Wait a minute. So you glared at her and she responded so that you could, Again, so you deal with your characteristics and so on. And then self-realization goes into that, wow, you do a great and wonderful thing if you can ever truly realize your self-personality. In other words, your larger self, your greater self, all of your characteristics, your true self. Wait a minute, that's only the beginning. Self-realization is that you are a soul. And yet, I don't know of anybody who has a very good image at all. Again, I even said image. An image of, in other words, me for me, my soul. In other words, my whole self. Well, my whole self, though. And that what proportion is my personality in relationship to my soul? Well, I do have a measurement that I'll share with you, and it'll be ambiguous enough that it can't offend anybody, is that if my characteristic is 1%, a characteristic is 1% of my characteristics, and all of my characteristics is my personality is only about 5% of my soul. So that gives you an idea of the minuscule thing that we think that which we are. Well, we're all of this and all of that and all this other stuff. And I'm stating that at any given time, and actually for me, who's sitting here right now, I wouldn't give myself credit as truly knowing myself, even on a personality level. And it was that which the psychologists say well, you will come to know all of yourself. And I say, baloney. That's a psychology level. God bless them and what they're trying to do. I mean, I kind of like my track record better than any of theirs. And I'm not really condemning them, but I am putting them in their place. And psychology doesn't know much of anything. Very few psychologists recognize a soul or a spiritual being at all. So you're blinding yourself of 95% of your actuality. In other words, you're blinding yourself. You're covering up your eyes and saying, there, now I'm going to try to see what it's like to have a beautiful sunset with your eyes covered up. Wait a minute, don't cover up your eyes. That's what you use. That's the instrument that you use it. And your soul is the instrumentation of God being human. Or a human being God. It's the instrument that's used. The instrument for your characteristics is your personality. And of course, the human body is the physical manifestation and the house, if you will, or the instrument of your brain and therefore your mind. Because your mind is the connectedness between your soul self and your mind and your brain. Your brain is the psychology connectedness to your psychology, that which interconnects your mind and your brain. And your psychology can function either biochemically or spiritually enhanced. All of a sudden you have a feeling of glory and glee and utopia. Are you actually perceiving a teardrop from God's eye? Or are you perceiving a biochemical function of beta endorphins? In other words, are you just stimulating nerve endings? Or are you having a creative, glorious feeling of creativity?
That's what they say about near-death experience, right?
Well, right, and both are true, by the way. I've never denied that. A large portion, a good portion, a percentage portion of many of the experiential actualities of any near-death experience are biochemically induced. The first 3 or 4 or 5 stages, depending on what research group you're getting the numbers from, the feeling of complete easement. Notice the pain and pressure was gone. I felt at ease. I felt like I could just pop out of my body, and I did. Up to that point, fine. I'll go along with biochemical produce analgesic flow of beta endorphins and enkephalins and opiates and all that sort of stuff. And it works that way. And that's how it's designed. That's, God designed it to do that. All right? And it does that by God. But what I want to tell you also equally and often simultaneously or irrespective of that this can take place, you can also be inspired spiritually speaking. And that is not just that you arrange certain biochemicals just right and with the right amount of electricity, so to speak, that you got this utopia feeling. It can be inspired spiritually. And then a characteristic of yours, and this personality could be, biochemically, we're learning that some people that are happy all the time, there is a brain functioning that does that. And that they can compare medically and scientifically, right down to the part of the brain, and either the missing link, so to speak, the missing part, or the missing flow of biochemical stuff is just the opposite in a person who is manically depressed. And that they are manipulating that and curing the manically depressed and assisting people to be happier. And this is in the very near future if we continue as we are. And that's all okay. But that doesn't deny at all that those same individuals, if they come in contact with their soul, if they have any recognition, any perception at all of the actuality of the soul self, instead of just sticking with this 5% of the physical stuff that makes us alive, makes us function. I mean, you can take a skate, another that swims in the ocean, a little skate, and after it's been dead for hours and hours and hours, even days if it hasn't really rotted, and put electrodes on it and have it swim. Now, does that mean that the skate is alive and swimming? The skate will be reacting electronically to biochemical only. And there will not be spirituality there. Again, we know that, most of us realize that there's spirituality in everything. But it is uniquely the skate as being an animal. It is only reacting to biochemical stimuli. And then a lot of us think that we're not really in love. We're just biochemically being stimulated into this romantic love or this lustful love. And both is true. Both is very true. I mean, you can be stimulated biochemically only, and you can be in a piss poor mood. But the other is true, and that makes it glorious, because that's the reward, if you will, if you ever think in terms of rewards or.
Okay, when you had your near-death experience and you went out of body, left the body behind, going into the tunnel, did you have a sense of being the other 95% of yourself?
Yeah, very much so. Well, I mean, I want to caution anybody listening to this. You asked me.
I'm asking you
Right.
personally for your own.
The answer is yes. It's fair to say, even though I don't like to say, that of the people that I've been involved in research, in a goodly proportion, more than 50% of the other near-death experiencers that I've either met personally or known or learned from through the research, that statement would not be true. Even though in their sentences they say that they become one with their soul, and in other words, a sentence is the terminology, the words. Judgmentally, I would say that a vast majority of those people, it's tough to say.
Is far enough into the near-death state to look at the experience?
See, I don't want to criticize or condemn them,
No,
because
it's
they
not.
experienced something twice as much or 100 times as much as that which they could have experienced otherwise. And that's okay, that's great. But I'm claiming that I know the difference, and that there is a difference. And that people that, for instance, that describe that they went to heaven, and then they stand there and describe imagery, like flowers and creeks and angels and, borderlining on angels and things like that. That's beautiful, and that's very heavenly. But then that leaves me with an explanation of, I know a heaven state that is more subtle than that, and shall I say, at the same time, more intensive and more glorious, more divine. You don't need imagery. You don't need the paradise stuff. It's still stuff.
Yeah. You go
And I mean,
you're talking
God doesn't need stuff. I know it's the true nirvanic state, the ultimate utopia.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I know you said that you had a complete review, life review, and a complete review of all your dreams. Did you have a complete review of all your lifetime?
No,
Okay.
that was easy.
That was easy.
But trust me, I know a lot more than what I'm saying.
I know you say you never lie, so I hate when
Yeah.
you say that.
Well, the correct answer is no.
Yeah.
In a typical life review, there's
You're only
usually.
reviewing this one.
I'm trying to think right now, and I can't think of anybody else who said anything about prior to their birth process. There's been a few inclinations that they knew of circumstances prior to their birth, but as the moviola type life review, as most people perceive it to be, no, I can't recall anybody right now of the few thousand that I know that have gone through an intensive near-death experience that experience anything toward reincarnation or anything toward their other lifetimes or even characteristics or personalities.
As you came back and began functioning again after your accident, you had an awareness of people in history. And at first we thought that you were those people in history. But then I think some people come to the conclusion that it was linking into universal knowledge that you knew these people.
All right, because I had the groups. I referred to often the pluralistic people because it was more than one character. The most easy to talk about is the group of scientists around the turn of the century: Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Max Planck, including Albert Einstein. But because of his popularity, I often have a tendency not to state his name because it's just so typical that if you're going to know any scientist, well, you have to know Albert Einstein, irrespective of that ego stuff. Yeah, that would be a group. That was one of the groups that I referred to. Now, that group comes from, first of all, a characteristic of my personality, and in the transitional state of my near-death experience, desiring to be like or know either the knowledge that they dealt with, the information that they dealt with, or the mindset or those characteristics. In other words, there's kind of